enjoy tonight. So thanks to everyone that's tuned in. I think this is one of the things that confuses a lot of the newcomers to the space about price. Okay, so that's why I want to talk about this and why it's so important, and help me pick a few of our biggest winners, because one of the first things people do when they get into this space is they think, the cheaper the better. And we look at these search results, best coins under 1 cent. Look, these videos have got 150,000 views and 200,000 views. And the fact is that most of these coins, if they're that cheap, look, it doesn't mean anything in terms of more likely to go up in price, more likely to make you rich, and coins that will make you a millionaire. In all honesty, guys, generally I think they're the coins that 99% are going to fail. Okay, a lot of the times projects will go out of their way to make coins under 1 cent because they know newcomers will watch these videos and buy them and speculate, and that mindset of, if it only goes to $1, I'll be rich. So let's explore CoinMarketCap here, probably a website that most of you are pretty familiar with by now, and the way that it lists them all by default is from market cap down. Okay, so let's explore a few different coins and what this means. So they get the market cap. It's derived from the price times the circulating supply, which is how many coins are currently out there in existence circulating around. So that's, the perceived value of the entire market is what the market cap here is, guys. So it's the same for all the different coins as we go down the list. It's the same mathematical formula, I guess. Now, the reason I want to talk about why price is not important, I'll give you an example to start off with. Now, one of the coins that we've been following since it was, I think under $30 was Maker. But if you had told two newcomers to the space which coin would you rather buy, a coin under 1 cent or a coin that's $30, their mind just goes, under 1 cent every day of the week. But you've got to look at the circulating supply and the market cap. Okay, that is what matters. So circulating supply of Maker here, it's only 600,000 compared to some of these coins that have millions or billions, trillions of coins in circulation. So all we needed to look at the time was the market cap back when it was $30. And the market cap was well under $100 million there, divided by 20. So back here, I think, $22, $24. So the point being, it's no easier or harder for a coin that's $20 or $30 to go to, this coin went up to $1,600. It's no harder or easier for it to go up 100-fold, which this coin has just about returned 100x. Whether it's under a cent or whether it's $30, okay, guys, what you need to ask yourself is, hey, what's the market cap? Can the market cap realistically increase 10-fold, 100-fold, and where would that put it in schemes of things? Now, if a coin to increase 100-fold has to increase its market cap to be bigger than Bitcoin, it's not realistic, is it? These small cap coins. So always looking at buying market cap, guys, and being realistic about what a market cap can grow to. And I want to talk about that as we move through the presentation. So the next thing I just want to touch on quickly, circulating supply. So this is how many Ethereum are currently in existence and circulating around the ecosystem. So free, for people to trade or in their wallets, all those things that they're in the ecosystem currently. Now, if you click on another coin like Bitcoin, it has circulating supply, but it also has max supply. And what max supply means is how many can ever exist. So obviously in the future, and every day more Bitcoin get mined, and I think it's 2140, and in 100 years from now, that will be how many Bitcoins can ever exist. Okay, so that's the maximum supply that can ever exist versus the circulating supply that are currently in existence. Now, if we head over to EOS, we see it's got the current circulating supply, the max that can ever exist, but also the total supply. So you'll notice there's about 4 million EOS that currently exist, but currently aren't circulating per se. So, where do these new coins come from? That's through inflation. Each year, different coins have an inflation rate. If they've got proof of stake rewards, such as EOS is going to have. So, new coins can be mined and brought into the ecosystem. So there's different ways where the new coins can come into existence and start to begin circulating. And sometimes, maybe these are locked up in wallets. Coins have different reasons why they might be in existence in the current total supply, but not yet circulating in the ecosystem. So they're out of circulation. So that's the difference between those three: circulating, the total, and what it will exist in the future, the max supply. So the next thing I want to talk about, guys, is the different metrics that can determine the price. So what can put upwards pressure on the price? Token economics is something we focus on with the projects we work with, and what I look for when investing. What coins are more likely to go up in price? Who's going to hold their coins and have an incentive not to sell them? Okay, so the coins that are actually in circulation might be very different. So think about 24-hour volume. How often is a coin turned over? All that sort of thing. So if we look at the top 100 Bitcoin addresses here, these have got somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 Bitcoins in them. So, a lot of value. But what we find is these top 100 Bitcoin addresses, they very rarely have large amounts go in or out. Okay, so pretty dormant, pretty active. These are people that own a lot of Bitcoin. They believe in the technology. They're here for the long run. So a lot of these coins aren't really in circulation per se. These coins aren't on exchanges every day, and that goes for everyone. A lot of people are seeing Bitcoin now as a store of value, or any cryptocurrency you can use when I'm talking about this. If people are seeing it as a store of value and they're speculating that it will go up in time, every time they hold that off an exchange where it can't be bought or sold, okay, that hodler of last resort mentality where you're holding your coins, there's less out there for people to buy, okay, all that stuff sort of is taking coins out of sort of circulation on the day-to-day exchanges for people to buy as well. So that's the sort of thing. So what style of coins are being used that aren't actually on exchanges to be bought and sold? And there's a few different things we can do. So we want those coins that are the platform style coins. A lot of people need Ethereum to raise ICOs, and that sort of takes it out of supply during that stage. Or other style platforms, if Neo is being used a lot by business in the future, proof of stake coins, okay, if there's a big incentive to lock coins up in those nodes, it's obviously taking that supply away from the market. So not only are you locking up a lot of coins that can't be sold on exchanges, but you're reducing the amount that people can buy on an exchange if they want to buy and set up a masternode. And that's one of the reasons we've seen a huge run up in price for Dash. It's very lucrative to own a masternode, but also those incentives to lock up the Dash for those people not to sell their masternode gets it harder and harder. And those sort of token economics are what's putting upwards pressure on the price, okay, giving people incentive to hold or use cryptocurrency, that token, in everyday life for a number of reasons. Reduces the amount that can be on exchanges. So that's the sort of point I want to get across there. So looking for things that are being used in the real world, I guess. Now, next thing I want to talk about is how this can also be misleading. So this is a list of Bitcoin hard forks. Now, I think there's more than this list here as well, but the point being, when there's a hard fork, as a general rule of thumb, there'll be the same number of the hard forked coins as actual Bitcoin at that time when the network splits off. Now, if we go down the list here, some of these coins, obviously a lot of you got your Bitcoin Cash, less exchanges gave you your Bitcoin Gold. So for example, Coinbase doesn't give you your Bitcoin Gold and Bitcoin Diamond. Look, maybe they will in the future, but the point I want to get across is that sometimes the founders of these different coins and hard forks give themselves a large amount. And now, this is where it can get a little bit complicated, but the point I want to make is that, yes, you'll see that in circulating supply, they'll have a certain number of coins. So let's head back over here. Bitcoin Gold, for example. So you'll see the sort of circulating supply there. Now, just because that's the amount that are currently in existence and out there in different wallets, there's a lot of you out there, I'm sure, that own Bitcoin. You've got it on your hardware wallet and you're not quite sure how to get your Bitcoin Gold. there's lots of scam websites out there for the smaller coins that'll ask you for your private key. Who do you trust? And a lot of people, even myself personally, I'm not too worried about all that long list of 20 or 30 hardcoin forks. So even though theoretically they exist, everyone that has Bitcoin is entitled to claim Bitcoin Gold, it doesn't necessarily mean it's actually out there, and a lot of people will never claim it. So the actual amount that is circulating is a lot lower than this figure than what we see. And again, sometimes that can give you the perceived market cap is the current price that someone's paid on an exchange, the average price across all exchanges, multiplied by the sort of theoretical circulating supply. But the fact might be that this is actually a lot smaller. The actual people that are using or holding Bitcoin Gold actually ever been active in existence or accessed from wallets since the hard fork. So this number here might be pretty falsely inflated, if that makes sense. So that's the message I'm trying to get across, talking about the hard forks, guys. And that's a theme we're going to see continue in the future. So where to from here? So I want to talk about unicorn companies and how big we can kind of expect a lot of companies to grow projects. What's realistic valuation? So privately listed companies that have exceeded $1 billion in valuation are known as unicorns. So, Uber's a prime example, Airbnb, SpaceX, you're going to recognize a few names on this list, but, these companies are well in the, tens of billions of dollars range. And, you can argue that a few of these projects definitely are going to be competing with, or as disruptive as, if not more so, than say Uber, for example, that's worth $60 billion. So we can start to get an idea of how much money does love these tech disruptive projects and how big they could grow. So next on the list here, we have some of the largest companies by market cap currently in existence. So PetroChina, over $10 trillion here. We go down the list, we know Apple, we're sort of waiting for that to become $1 trillion company. So these are in the hundreds of billions of dollars, guys. So up the list here, we've got a lot of Chinese companies. Amazon will be here somewhere. 500. So look, if we think about something like Amazon and Apple, Facebook, they've all become part of our everyday lives. But I'm sure some of you are hopeful that some of these projects that we're invested in are going to become just as disruptive. Now, these are in the single billions of dollars in valuation if we look through the top 20 here. So let's just take a project. I'm just going to pick at random here, guys. I'm fans of NAM, VeChain, Neo. So all these projects here, sort of $3 billion, $2 billion. If they're really disruptive and become world leaders, maybe it is realistic for these market caps to grow to tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars. Now let's not forget that for the first time ever, these platforms are going to be international. So not just stocks that are listed on one stock exchange or a couple of stock exchanges in one or two countries. We can have capital and money flow into these decentralized projects from every country on the planet. Okay, so cryptocurrency is different to just accessing it. Stock market participants, everyday retail investors, and everyone on the planet can really access and start to invest in these decentralized projects. Now, then we have the platforms. So if you really think that, Ethereum, EOS, Neo, VeChain, NEM, the list goes on of actual platforms which things will have built on top of them, these are the market caps of that entire stock exchanges itself. Now, these cryptocurrencies as a whole are a different asset class. All the different cryptocurrencies and blockchain-based projects represent an entirely new asset class, which I like to think of as a new stock market of sorts. So you look at the New York Stock Exchange, 18 trillion. NASDAQ with all the tech stocks, 7 trillion. Tokyo, nearly 5 trillion. Shanghai. So we're talking in the multiples of $1 trillion now. And we know that the total crypto market cap's currently around 340 billion there. So there's a long way to go, at least 10x, tenfold for the entire space before we even get into the realms of, again, stock market caps, which I spoke about. And again, guys, that I think this is more disruptive in terms of being, a world global movement rather than just these specific countries, that I just spoke about. Now, again, similar vein of thought, entire sectors. So when I'm looking at a project, what sector are they disrupting? Is Power Ledger disrupting the energy sector? It's a $4 trillion sector. It only needs to capture, 1% of that to have a huge increase in its market cap. Healthcare, I think I covered about 4 projects that are disrupting healthcare as well. $5 trillion industry. And, this is just stats from one country as well, I believe, guys. So the point I'm trying to make here is, again, think global. If these industries are, in the trillions of dollars just for the US or one country, we truly have an opportunity for crypto to really capture some of these markets and disrupt some of these markets that are $1 trillion markets. Now, I made a video called Can Bitcoin Reach $1 Million? Guys, that's going to be part 1. I'm actually going to bring out part 2 later this week, probably Friday night, where I'm talking about the token economics, phrasing it that way, of Bitcoin. So in this video, I spoke about market caps and, gold's got that $7 trillion market cap. We hear about the dot-com bubble getting to around that mark as well before it popped, all that sort of thing. And, talking about Forex reserves and if Bitcoin can compete with all that. But this was in the part 1. In part 2, I really want to talk about the things that are putting upwards pressure on the Bitcoin price from more of a tokenomics point of view specific to Bitcoin, rather than that macro view of what's happening around the world that could cause money to go into Bitcoin. So tune in for part 2 of that as well later this week, guys. But the next thing I want to talk about is specific coins that have pretty favorable token economics. So I harp on about Horizon State, guys, but voting's a very noble cause and transparency for blockchain, but every time they have a vote, there's a certain amount of tokens that are going to get burnt. Now they get burnt out of existence. So you might have heard frozen when coins get, locked up for a period of time. You might have heard the term burnt, which means they're, gone forever. There's a famous Ethereum address, 0x followed by a long string of zeros, which is where tokens go to die, guys. So that's again, that's where you can send tokens to get burnt. It just means they're locked in a smart contract or an address that no one has the private key to, so they can never be accessed again. So there's lots of things. Anytime you're taking coins out of circulation, obviously you're reducing supply, guys, and putting upwards pressure on price. So they're the sort of things, as well as the staking and all the other metrics that I looked about. Token velocity, is it being used? A lot of people are talking about Ripple. Sure, if a bank pays another bank with some Ripple, they only need it for that split second when they send it from A to B, and then they don't need to hold it, okay? So you've got to think about, is there incentive to hold? Is people going to be using this often? How often is it turned over? Token velocity. And when we're having these big elections and tokens get burnt, I think Horizon State's got very favorable token economics. Now, BlockGrain, I've been talking about a lot recently. There's still a lot of confusion around the token economics. Now, there's 30% called a commodities fund. The tokens will be held by BlockGrain to support commodity transactions. So think about how many people say, how big's the market disrupting for BlockGrain? Well, guys, it's food, okay? So currently they're working a lot with pilots and their minimal viable product with cereals and grains already underway for fruit and vegetables, but wool, livestock, I want medical marijuana, poppies. Think about how big all these industries are, and if they need the agri token to back the commodity contracts, if we're shipping hundreds of millions of dollars of commodities across the world and that's required to be done in agri token, the commodities fund's got to be backing those guys. Think about how big that can grow from the, I think the initial RCO market cap's $30 million. So they're the sort of things I look at. How big can it grow? How big's the industry they're disrupting? Who's going to be using that? Is this in every country, every industry, all those sort of things? And again, I think it's really misunderstood, some of the token economics of different projects. Next thing I want to talk about is a trend that we're starting to see. Now, I know there's a lot in the news lately, and I tweeted about how I'm not a fan where there's only 3% of the actual total supply currently circulating, on day one when a coin gets listed. Now, to Binance's credit, they put out this warning about how it could be very volatile. It was indeed, it got up to 40 cents, I think, before getting down to 20 cents. So a lot of you guys are still sitting at a big profit, and that's fine. And this is nothing against QuarkChain. I think this is actually a pretty exciting project from what I've read so far. But the point I want to make here is the theme is that ICOs are now going away from trying to raise as much as they can to only selling a very small amount of coins. Now, this is, a staggered approach of bringing more coins into circulation. Some projects are saying, hey, we'll only bring more coins into circulation at a certain time, or when we've met certain goals. I'd love to see all that be put into a smart contract rather than just, pinky promise sort of stuff. But another trend we're seeing is the ICO project raises a few $1 million. They use that straight away to pay to get on a big exchange like Binance. It creates a lot of speculation. The coin lists at 10 to 20x. But it also allows, often the founders or whoever to unload. So rather than raising $5 million, that might have been what all they're able to raise if they're a bad project, for example. Now, if the coin has a lot of hype and not a lot of circulating supply, it hits the exchange at 10x, they're able to sell all their tokens, the project, and bring in maybe $50 million that they wouldn't have otherwise had. So it's a different way of sort of starving the market of those tokens to really ramp up that buying pressure when there's not many on the exchanges, and the team are the ones that benefit as well, guys. So there's different ways that ICOs are starting to get a bit smarter with raising money. So you really do have to have your wits about you. Do due diligence on the team, how it's going to work when the tokens are entering supply, how many tokens the team hold, are they locked? Is that in a smart contract? Ask the hard questions, guys, to these projects, because they're getting really smart with the way that they're kind of trying to get the better of the average investor, I guess, as well. So just to finish, guys, I'll take a couple of questions, but tune in for part 2 of can Bitcoin reach $1 million in the next few years? If that's the case, I believe, fiat money is going to be greatly devalued through inflation and all those other things that we see. But hopefully that was a pretty clear explanation. You've got your head around some of those different concepts around a market cap and circulating supply. And just finally, I've got something that I want you to... It's the main takeaway message about how even if you can understand all these concepts, it's still very important to realize that all of this can still be misleading depending on a coin. And this is more so for small coins that I'm about to talk about, guys, how they can really pull the wool over your eyes depending on what exchanges they're listed on. I see a lot of people pumping and dumping small cap coins, so always check out the 24-hour volume for a coin. If something's less than $100,000 24-hour volume, and people are pumping it in pump and dump groups or on social media groups with large followings. Guys, if you've got hundreds or thousands of followers and you're pumping a coin that only has a few $100,000 24-hour volume, guess what? It's going to go up in price. And guess who gets rich? The people that bought it before they made that announcement on Facebook, or before they put out that video on YouTube or that Twitter post. So guys, always be skeptical when someone tells you about a low cap coin, okay, with a very low 24-hour volume and circulating supply. They're the ones that can collapse on themselves very quickly when people want to run for the door and there's not enough volume to sell. So let's jump into this now. So this is the most important thing to take away from this video, guys. So let's say there's a coin out there that has 1 million coins in circulation. The current price is $10. Now that has a $10 million market cap. And again, that's the perceived value, perceived total value of that project or that coin, all the coins that are currently out there. Now, what if there's not a lot of trade volume or there's not a lot of coins on markets? It hasn't really hit exchanges yet. Look, for whatever reason, let's just say that someone pays $20 for a coin on an exchange. Now, the price then shows up on CoinMarketCap or your app or whatever it is as $20, if that's the last price that someone has paid. Now, this is an exaggerated example, guys, but I just want to get the point across. So if one person pays $20, that shows up as the new price, the last price that someone paid for the coin. So sorry, I'll just change that to $1 million as well. So now we have 1 million coins times $20, so we've got a $20 million market cap. So how much money has actually entered that coin, that ecosystem, the total worth of that project, the perceived value? There's only been $20 enter the market, yet the market cap's increased from $10 to $20 million. So it's increased $10 million, yet only $20 has entered it. So that's why you've got to look at these other metrics. 24-hour volume. How many exchanges has it listed on? Has it been traded a lot in the past? We see these values for Bitcoin, Ethereum, these huge values, but the fact is that this is all sort of the best estimation. So pie in the sky stuff to some extent. If Bitcoin reaches a valuation of, $10 trillion in the future, it doesn't mean we actually have to have $10 trillion of printed money, fiat money, come into the ecosystem. It can simply mean that people out there are paying a very high price for the few coins that are on exchanges. Now, if you're lucky enough to sell at those high prices and take advantage of it, that's great, guys. But this is the really important takeaway concept. Price, at the end of the day, market cap, it's all a little bit airy-fairy still, even with everything that you know. So use it to your advantage. When something gets oversold to the downside, pick up cheap coins, and use it to your advantage to the upside. When someone's paying too much in the next bull market, it's completely euphoric. People are paying wild prices for altcoins that are giving them a huge falsely inflated market cap. Doesn't mean you can't take advantage and lock in that price if you're smart, even though we know that the market cap hasn't actually had that $10 million flow into it, for example. You can still sell for that price. So I hope that all makes sense, guys. Again, that Maker example, one of my favorite coins that people are watching these videos trying to find coins under 1 cent. Sometimes the best projects out there, aren't mucking around with these ridiculous circulating supplies, and all that matters really, guys, is getting a good feel for the market cap and the price, the team, the token economics, those real world metrics. And this one going from $20 to $1,600 is a perfect example of one coin that didn't appear in any of those Make You Rich videos, and one coin that we picked very early because it had strong fundamentals. So hope you appreciate that video, guys. Please share these around, subscribe if you haven't already, hit that like button, and as always, thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.